let's talk about the long-range effects. How many people, let's just kind of do a quick survey, and how many people have noticed some effects, some positive benefits from the meditation so far? You want to just shout out and say, okay, I've noticed this or noticed that, just real quick.
I'm sleeping deeper.
Sleeping deeper. Okay, great. Anybody else?
I mentioned it before. My shoulders don't hurt like they did before I started the meditation.
Right. His shoulders, Don was saying his shoulders don't hurt like they used to before he learned to meditate. You can read his testimonial on my website. He gets into it much greater detail there. But, you know, he's told he had arthritis and this and that. And the doctors wanted to drug him up. And then he started meditating and it dissipated. So other things, you know, other people notice effects of the meditation outside of the meditation time? Mario, you want to talk about that? More calm. So Michelle.
Yes. Absolutely. I've been meditating for these past 3 weeks almost. And I'll tell you, just like you said, just when meditating is about letting go. Well, that's exactly how you feel in life. You let it go. As easy as you're supposed to do in the meditation, I have noticed that precisely because I feel that there has been a little increase in my confidence. Now I feel less. That immediately reduces my stress level. So I'll tell you, definitely has helped. Just because I feel it a little bit increasing my confidence. I feel there's gonna be less chance for problems or complications. It's just generally helps to feel more confident.
That's great, Mario. Thanks for sharing that. That's excellent. Yeah, increased self-confidence. It's huge. It's huge. That's like the fundamental thing for all of us. If we can increase our self-confidence somewhat, it has positive rippling effects, you know, throughout our life, every aspect of our life. Michelle just sent me a text. She's on the call, and she sent me a text that she said she feels more calm during challenges, which is awesome. That's great. Brian, anything you want to share?
Yeah, sort of more or less the same things that everybody else is talking about. Much calmer, less stress.
Less stress, more calm. Yeah, great.
Pretty much like me, because having that confidence, just you feel, they feel confident because you feel calm, right? Yep. You don't get that instant stressful experience of what am I going to do now? Is it going to have a good outcome? So yeah, pretty much share the same feeling.
That's great. Yeah, it's a positive snowballing effect that one thing affects the other in a positive way. That's great. Win, anything?
Yeah, I'll drive to work on 128 in the traffic, and for half an hour to an hour, depending on how much traffic.
Yeah.
And when I get there, I'm there a little early. So I sit in the car and I shut it off and I sit there and I meditate for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And when I go into work, it's like I'm much more focused.
Yeah.
Everything just falls into place.
Yeah.
There's no chaos.
Awesome. Yeah, and where does that come from? That comes from inside us. Inside us, you know? We are more at peace inside. We're more collected or centered or whatever word you want to use inside ourselves. And then externally, the world can be doing whatever it's doing, but we can handle it much better. That's the thing. That's the critical thing. Those are all great. Anybody else? Anything else? Anybody else want to say? Comment? So let me talk about this in the context of long-range effects. So you've heard different people describe it in their own different ways, and we all will experience it subjectively in different ways at different times in our life. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Even the same person it'll be more intense. Sometimes the effect, and other times it will not be as much noticeable as much. Here's the thing. The point is that over time, there's this incremental growth that happens, incremental benefits that accrue over time, little by little by little by little, more longer and longer. And what you'll notice initially in the first few days and weeks when you first learn is that the effects of the meditation fade away. They don't last forever. You know, it fades away after some hours, maybe several hours, whatever, but it'll fade away. Well, that's normal. And I like to give you an example to give you a context of how to think about this about what's going on in your nervous system, in your consciousness as you continue meditating. This is kind of analogous to dyeing the old piece of cloth. Like you have an old piece of cloth and you have a t-shirt or whatever, and it's a certain color, and let's say it's white, and you wanted to dye that piece of cloth green, like the color of my shirt here. And so you get some green dye and you put it, the old technique, back in the old days, the old tie-dye days, you throw the bucket of water, clear water, you throw the dye, the little cube of dye in it, green dye, let's say, and the water looks green now. Okay, you take the white t-shirt, you put it in there, but you don't just leave it in there. You leave it in there for a little while, you let it soak, and then you take it out and you hang it up. The old technique was you hang it up in the sun on a clothesline or outside on a railing or in a clothes hanger out in the sun, and the sun would bleach out, it would dry out the t-shirt, the white t-shirt, and you'd look at it, and it still looked white. It didn't look green like this yet, but it's like still white. But if you looked at it microscopically, you could see that there's a teeny tiny bit of green dye stuck in the fabric of the white t-shirt. Okay, you do it, then you take it and you dip it in the bucket again, and you hang it up in the clothesline again or out in the sun, and it fades. You dip it and you fade it, dip it and you fade it. A little bit more of the dye sticks, a little bit more. That's analogous to what we're doing in our meditation. We're dipping our mind and our body inside. We come out into our activity. We're running around doing this and that on Route 128, dealing with traffic, getting to work, whatever. We are using our slightly different nervous system while we're driving in traffic on Route 128. When we do that, we're making permanent the effects of the meditation a little bit. It's like dipping and fading, dipping and fading. Eventually, the effects of the meditation are so much infused throughout our nervous system that they're pretty much there and really noticeable all the time. And so that's when the t-shirt looks just like deep green, in the analogy, right? But it's incremental. You don't notice it every day. You don't notice it every other day even. You may look back after a few weeks and then notice something. Oh, wow, I really feel different now. Like, I'll give you myself as an example. Give you myself as an example here. When I first learned to meditate, I was really stressed out. I was in college. It was like, those of you, some of my high school classmates are on this particular class, right, in this meditation class right now. I did pretty well in high school, but when I went to college, I went to Dartmouth, everybody else was like number 1, number 2 in their class. So what? So the pressure was intense. And it was so stressful for me that was number 1, and it was affecting me psycho-emotionally, the anxiety, the self-confidence that Mario talked about. I was 19 years old, and it was really shaking me up. And so I learned to meditate, and the first things that I noticed was, okay, emotionally, I felt more stable. I didn't feel anxious anymore. And I didn't feel stressed, and my memory improved, and I could focus, like Wynn was saying, I could focus better outside of my meditation time in my classes. So we're not focusing during meditation. We know that's a cardinal rule. We don't focus, but in the technique. But outside of the meditation, I could focus much better. Why could I focus much better? Because as Mario said, when you're more self-confident and you're feeling more relaxed inside about yourself and not so anxious, you can focus better in your waking state because you're not wasting all that energy in being nervous.
True, very true. And Kelvin, sorry to interrupt you, and not only in school necessarily, but also I have noticed the focusing part when I'm just simply having a conversation with my mom, for instance. Now, since I can listen to her better, now we have this problem. See how everything fits together even better.
Exactly, improving relationships. A great example. Improving the relationships, exactly. Because we realize that, we can't change the other person, but we can change ourselves. And if we can change ourselves in this positive way, that's going to positively affect the relationships. Absolutely. It's a great example. All right. So that's what's going on gradually. This is one way of describing the effects of what's going on a very nitty-gritty level, just kind of extrapolating from what all of you said in terms of the effects and the benefits. Let me talk about it a little bit different way in terms of this change in the structure of experience idea that I talked about earlier. You know, what did I say? Change in the structure of experience is what I'm promoting and what's going to happen with all of you, in each of you. It's already happening, and you will notice it more and more as you continue meditating. This change in the structure of how you experience. So when you kind of started to, you know, dance in that field a little bit, change in the structure of how you're experiencing driving on Route 128. That's a change in the structure of how you're experiencing, because it's not about 128. 128 is what it is. It's not like, oh, I took a different route. Okay, that, you know, that can have an effect, right? But you're on the same route, but in the same traffic, but because your structure of experience has changed, your experience of driving has changed. And there you get to work and so forth, and you close your eyes and meditate in the parking lot, you get there early, and the structure of your work is change of how you're experiencing work is changing. It's not necessarily the work that's changed. That's changing in experience, okay? I'm saying we're changing the structure of how we experience, which is an internal experience. It's inside. It's our self-confidence. It's our sense of self that's changing. It's how our relationship with our outer experience, that's what's changing. So that's another way of describing what I mean when I say change in the structure of how we experience, okay? Here's a third way of describing it to you. Those of you who have video can see what I'm holding up to the screen. If you can't, I'll tell you what it says. It's just, I've written these words on this piece of paper. Conscious of X, Y, Z. Conscious of blank, I have written on a sheet of paper. Conscious of blank. So those of you who have read my book have read me, heard a more detailed version of what I'm going to talk about with regards to this idea. Because my friend Charlie Donahue is a philosophy professor in Massachusetts now. He came up with this phrase, and I love what Charlie did because he took this very abstract idea of the mind and expanding the mind and all these abstract, esoteric sounding ideas, and he put it into this basically a three-word formula, conscious of X. And if you think about it, most people define themselves on this side of the equation, the XYZ side. So that defining yourself on this side means things like, oh, how much money do I make? Oh, what's my title at work? How many kids do I have? Where do they go to school? Those are XYZs, he would say, because they're definable. You can write them down. You can point to them. They're specific. So he called them the XYZs. I sometimes refer to them as the objects of experience. So we're talking about experience now. These are the objects of experience. This side of the equation, the conscious side, that's the experiencer. That's us. We are the experiencer. But the problem is that most people get confused and they smush them all together and they think that they're the XYZs. And so they identify who they are with how much money they make. And then they lose their job. And then if they lose their job, they lose their identity. Well, that's not who you are. Your job is paying your bills. And I'm not saying you can't work. Yeah, the job is helping pay the bills. But that's not who you are as a human being. This is who you are. Your consciousness, or what I refer to, you heard me use the word mind. And I use the word mind in the small way, like the decision-making mind, but I use the mind to include the big mind too. All of these vast areas of our mind, that's this side. So this is changing the structure. This is a way to write down, if you wanted to write it down in a formula, this is changing the structure of your experience by connecting this side with this side, the mind with the objects of experience. And that's another way of saying the same thing of what Wynn and I were just talking about driving on Route 128. The 128 is this, the XYZ. How we're experiencing that is based on how connected we are inside ourselves with our own mind. The more connected we are with our own mind, the more fun we're going to have and the less stress we're going to have with all the XYZs, whether it's talking to our mom or going to school and classes or whatever it is. And Mario, I don't know if you remember, but I probably told you about my experience with my dad. And those of you who remember my dad was a tough guy sometimes. He had his way. It was Henry's way or the highway. That my dad's name was Henry. It was Henry's way of the highway, and that was it. And I used to butt heads with him because I said, "No, Dad, I have a highway too, so it's not just your highway." And of course, that was a mistake. But as soon as I relaxed about it, when I started meditating, I started not arguing with my dad so much because I realized that there are many highways. Mine and his were two of the many. So that whole change in the structure of experience, that's another example of changing the structure of how we experience. I didn't change my father. My father stayed the same till he died when he was 80 years old. But
that's a perfect example of letting go.
Right?
That's a perfect one.
Yeah, letting go. I had to let him go to be who he was in order for me to be who I was. That was the great lesson for me. So that is changing the structure of experience. Okay, any questions on this so far? That's what I mean. So what we're doing here is changing the structure of how you experience, which is why I de-emphasize caring about what our experience is during meditation. I don't really care, and you shouldn't either. Because the more you care about your experience during meditation, the more you're getting stuck over here in the XYZs. And you're diluting the whole process of self-development. This is what most self-development teachers, never mind meditation teachers, do not understand. They teach all about the XYZs. Oh, you got to change the XYZs. That will change things a little bit, but you want to have a huge change, you change the relationship between yourself and the XYZs. That's what I'm teaching in the work that I do, whether it's through the meditation or any of the other work that I do. That's the fundamental shift. That's when big things happen, okay? Otherwise, you're still arguing whether the teddy bear is your ice cream cone or the ice cream cone is a teddy bear. You can argue till the cows come home on that, but you wanna change your perspective on that? Wake up and have a waking state instead of a dream state. That's a change in the structure of experience. That's what I'm teaching. So when people talk about this idea of enlightenment, if you want to talk about enlightenment in that way, I'm all for it. Okay? We're turning the light switches on. Now back to this other analogy that many of you have heard me use before about the football stadium and the 8-inch plastic bucket, right? So you got this little 8-inch plastic bucket. Here's how that fits into this structure of experience concept that we're talking about in terms of the long-range effects of the meditation. That little plastic bucket, that little 8-inch plastic bucket that's sitting down at the 50-yard line with 8 or 10 ping pong balls bouncing in and out of it, that the 8 or 10 ping pong balls, those are the XYZs here. All right? And your consciousness, your mind thinks incorrectly, not only that it's the XYZs, but it thinks it's just that little 8-inch plastic bucket. And it is the 8-inch plastic bucket, but it's not only the 8-inch plastic bucket. So I'm not saying our mind is not that 8-inch plastic bucket also. It is. That's our focusing part of the mind, the normal thinking part of the mind that most people have. But most people incorrectly think that's their entire mind. And the analogy that the psychology professor was giving to the graduate students at the University of Houston in 1960-something was that that's not their whole mind. The rest of the Astrodome, the huge football stadium, was their mind. Of course, we know that the mind is not a physical structure, so the analogy breaks down. But just for sake of the argument, and just to give the image, it's huge. It's not the 8-inch plastic bucket. And so by expanding outside of the 8-inch plastic bucket, we connect the mind more and we develop the mind more. We turn on the light switches in the rest of the football stadium. That you could call an enlightening experience, right? You're turning the light switches on. in the other parts of this football field, which is your mind. So now you're not just the 8-inch plastic bucket. You realize you're much more vast than that. And what does that do? That does what Mario has described. It gives you more self-confidence. It's expanding your conscious capacity for experience. That's a mouthful. I'll say it again. It's expanding your conscious capacity for experience, expanding your conscious mind. So you hear people talk about the subconscious. You can talk about the subconscious from now to, till the end of time. Big deal. What I'm talking about is you are, by meditating every day, reducing your subconscious and expanding your consciousness, your conscious mind. By expanding your conscious mind, you are allowing yourself to access and use more of your mind. That means you can be smarter, you can have better memory, you can have better relationships, and you can have less stress. Because when your mind is that much more expanded, you can take so much more into account. You don't lose the forest from the trees. You know that expression? Sometimes people, they get so caught up in things. That expression means people will get so caught up in things, they'll get myopic. They'll get too focused. And then they lose perspective. And then they make bad decisions or they get stressed. So the meditation is making that not happen. That's why you want to keep meditating. And there's a long range effect to this. Now you each notice some individual stuff that's more short term, and it's great. But what I'm saying is that it'll become long term, it'll become more permanent, and these longer term effects will start happening even more and more and more and more. To the point where now I've been meditating 50 years. So what is it like? I've been meditating 50 years. What's my experience like? Because my stress level is fairly non-existent. My memory's great. All of that stuff that I wanted at the beginning has gone away. So why do I keep meditating? I meditate because my consciousness has expanded to such a great extent, and you'll hear me talk more about this in the talk when I do the video conference series that we talked about, the 6-part series, how my consciousness has expanded into other areas so that I have mental experience now, not just on this side of the veil, but on the other side of the veil, to the extent where it's just like I'm talking to you. It's not esoteric to me. It's esoteric, only sounding esoteric when it's foreign to people. But it's been going on for me for 30 years now, 35 years now, so that it's not foreign. And so that's why I talk about it in the very rational, understandable way that I talk about those things. So, but balance, it's about my state of balance and my state of equanimity and the openness and perspective that my mind has all the time. And that's what's going to happen with you. That's just a preview of coming attractions. Questions, anything before we end the class? Comments? Anything at all? So what's the formula for this? Meditate twice a day. If you miss every once in a while, don't worry about it. You can always get back into it. You will never, ever forget how to do this. To your dying day, literally, you will remember how to do this. And you will have it as a tool in your toolbox whenever you want to use it. And I recommend highly that you do it regularly twice a day, because that's what's going to create the most state of balance, and that's what's going to accelerate the growth that we just talked about in terms of changing the structure of how we experience. But that's up to you. That's a personal choice, and I lay no guilt trips on anybody. And people will come back, as some of you know, you'll come back to me and say, hey, can I meditate with you? And I haven't been meditating a while, and I don't lay any guilt trips on you at all, because it's not about that. It's about where you are right now, and I'm here to help people where they are now all the time. And so you know how to reach me. You want to meditate with me anytime, you just send me a text, shoot me an email, and then we'll set up a time. If I'm free, I'm free. I'll do it right then. If I'm not, then I'll let you know when I'm free. and we'll schedule a time. In other words, you don't have to just wait for the next refresher class comes around. You could meditate with me individually. I do it with people very regularly, okay, as my schedule allows. And so you should feel free, because I have lots of flexibility. I have lots of windows in my schedule, and I do it, day or evening, 7 days a week. I do take time off for myself, don't worry. But somebody asked me that the other day. And but I'm available with people, and it's fun for me to meditate with you. So it's not work for me. And it's not work for me to help you and answer your questions about meditation or any other form of question that you have as it relates to your self-development. It's fun for me. This is fun for me, so I enjoy it. So, feel free, knock on my door anytime you feel like it. Okay? Questions, anything at all?
Could you lend me $10?
I can lend you $10. Yes, I can lend you. Any other questions?
I was in court paying a ticket a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Yeah. Could you lend me $10?
Did you say that to the judge?
Yeah. I'm a doctor, a judge, a lawyer. For 50-something years, anybody says, "Are there any questions?" That's my standard answer.
What did the judge say? Oh, good. You're good.
$65 off my ticket.
He did?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's Oregon for you versus Los Angeles. I'll tell you, it wouldn't happen like that.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Great to see everybody. You know how to reach me if you need me. And don't be shy. Okay?
All right.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Kelvin.
Okay. You guys take care.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Good night, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.